Today, what we're going to be watching, this is going to be another React video, but I'm going to watch a interview that Naguura did. She is a WoW content creator, WoW Twitch streamer. She's been around for a very long time. She does a lot of good content. But basically, she had a pretty cool interview. It's a little bit long, but just asking really good questions about it. So I feel like it would be really awesome for us to watch. So what I'm going to do is just pull that up. Let's go ahead and dive right into it and see what they had to say. So this is Naguura, like I said, WoW content creator. She asked WoW developers about Endgame and the new expansion.
Hello everyone, my name is Naguura, and today I have something special for you because I was able to sit down with production director Michael Bybee and senior game designer Sean McKen for an interview. I was able to ask them about high-end endgame content in The War Within and about Delves specifically. Quick note, I was in London for the War Within Blizzard event, so the setup that I had was not my setup was not optimal, so excuse the quality a little bit, but I hope you enjoyed the interview anyway, and let's get into it. Hi, well, first of all, thank you so much for joining me on this interview. I wrote down like a million questions and I didn't submit any of them beforehand. So I was a little bit worried that you're just going to say like, I can't answer this question. I can't answer this question. So I was thinking before I go into my questions, I'm going to ask you.
I like that. I like that she didn't submit questions right away, right? Because I feel like a lot of content, or not a lot of interviews, are not necessarily staged, but they're prepped, right? So like you can only ask certain questions. They won't ask questions about X, Y, and Z, and they get to pick the question so they can have like a formulated answer for you. But I like that she didn't do that because you're gonna get genuine like train of thoughts from the developers and seeing how they're gonna go about the question, and maybe a couple slip ups, which makes it more human. But that's kind of what the point of interviews are, right? It's you're trying to figure out some information without being too like uh trying to worry too much about the publicity of it, right?
If you have anything that you want to talk about a little bit more, like something specific that you maybe would be willing to share more information about, or something that you like a lot, something that you're looking forward to in The War Within when it comes to like endgame content.
Yeah, I should probably go first, or do you want to go first, Bybee?
Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
Sure. Well, so my name's Sean McCann. I am the Delves guy, and so
Delves guy.
my answer might be kind of obvious, but it's warbands. No, I'm really excited for Delves. Uh, there's a lot of cool things that we're doing for Delves for level up and max level. Personally speaking, Delves is kind of the content that I really want to play with my friends. I
The Delves is a really cool idea. If y'all don't know what the Delves is, it's basically just a feature that they're adding to War Within that's based around world content and exploration, right? So it's another way to level up. I do have a video of it. I'll go ahead and put it up at the end of my video. But if not, just I'll have the link in the description. But basically, it's just a way for you to do outdoor content that gives you rewards similar to like I think heroic dungeons, maybe, or something like that. That's comparable and will get you into raiding groups, right? Seems like a really cool idea. Check out the video. And if not, just look it up. Really awesome. They're probably gonna touch base on it too.
I really like the thing with Delves that I really love a lot is it is content for someone that maybe doesn't always have 20 to 30 minutes of uninterrupted time to play. And so, I've got 3 kids, and so sometimes that can be I've got 2 hours, everyone's asleep, or I've got 5 minutes at max before I have to go AFK because, something bad happened behind me. And so being able to do delves solo or with my friends is a really big deal for me. My friend group is not terribly organized, and so I'm the only healer, and there's 4 DPS, and so that kind of normally leaves us like in a lurch of what we can actually do sometimes. And so I'm just super jazzed because it means we can team whenever we want, whenever our schedules align, we could do something in delves, and actually have it be difficult too, like because we do like doing hard content in our friend group. I know that because I have to heal everybody through all of it. And so that's what I'm super jazzed about for coming to War Within.
Like that.
Yeah. I do have one question about Delphs in particular. So I was testing Delphs earlier today, which was really cool. I did play by myself, and it was cool that I was able to choose if I have a healer that helps me or a DPS or what's going on. And then I also thought it was interesting that you can choose the tiers of the difficulty, right? And then I was like, a question that I had since the delves are also going to be part of the vault, the Great Vault as well, and I assume there's also going to be some sort of like item rewards of doing the delve itself, not just related to the vault. And I was wondering how far they're going to be scaling up those rewards. Are they going to be similar to like the max rewards that you can get from Mythic Plus, or is it going to be below that?
That's a really good question because that was actually one of my main concerns about delves. Is like I don't know if I don't know where I read this or maybe I misheard this, but I heard that it was going to be like heroic raid tier or higher, right? Which is like at the highest difficulty delve for sure. Is what I heard was going to be like that, right? Um, which to me, like I just hope that if it is that good of a reward, it has to be difficult to do, right? Like y'all remember the mage shower from Legion, like that shit is hard, right? And so it feels fulfilling when you do it. And if they're gonna make something that gives you a reward, like it should be difficult because if it's not difficult and you're getting all this content or all this gear, I mean, um, that's very high end gear, you can just do delves by yourself, right? And like you don't have to do raids, you don't have to do what's it called, like high end content, right? To get the best gear, which some players might like, but at the end of the day, that kind of destroys the whole MMO feel, right? And I feel like I just hope that if it is going to be that it's very hard to do, and I just don't hope it's like the best gear you can get, right? Because I do think that there is some sort of like incentive for you to want to do like the highest tier raid, right? Or something like that, right? I just feel like that's if not, then people can spam the shit and get fully gear without even having to do anything, right? But hopefully, to touch base on that. That's just my take on it. You'll probably get an answer that's way better than mine.
So yeah, Mythic Plus at the highest tier for Mythics will always be like above Delves.
Okay,
The
awesome.
plan with
Jake, right away.
Delves is we're gonna have about because you don't see it right now in Alpha, but there's gonna be 11 tiers in total for
Okay,
Okay.
difficulty. Tiers 4 through 11 are gonna unlock when the season begins. So we kind of give everyone some time to kind of get used to the mechanics, see what's going on before we hit you really hard on things. Right now the plan is that the highest Delve reward will go up to Mythic 5. So it's pretty high up
oh, that's pretty high.
for someone like me who doesn't I don't necessarily get to like the old Mythic 20s and stuff like that. Um, and the way that we're doing that is one through the Great Vault and also two through our key system. And so when you get to max level, you'll have opportunities to go run delves that have extra rewards in it, and then you can use keys that you get from doing outdoor world content in order to unlock those. And so we'll be pacing those out. So we're never gonna limit you to like, hey, you just can't do a delve if your friend wants to do it, you're out of luck. But this is also a way we want to make sure that people are still, doing stuff in the outdoor world. We want to make sure the outdoor world doesn't become barren because now delves are here, so you can ignore all the hard work everyone else has done. And then also makes it feel like delves are part of the entire world as a whole and not just kind of sequestered off to the side.
Good.
So I don't know if
Mhm.
that answered your question fully.
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, it answers the question for, I think for me, like as a Mythic Raider, it basically means that if I don't want to do delves, if I'm not interested in that content, then I don't have to do it to get the rewards from the vault because it doesn't scale up as much as like the Mythic Plus rewards would or the Mythic rating rewards would. But what if I'm a like let's say a normal mode raider, a heroic raider, and I don't necessarily like doing delves? Would that person still feel like they have to do
See,
it to fill out
exactly.
their vault? Or do you think the items that drop there are not necessarily needed? Like, can you just fill your vault with the normal mode rates and plus, and then just leave it there?
That's a great like add on to the question because the whole point, and I think the scary thing about adding delves is like, will it take away from all this other content that we have, right? Because Mythic and reading is like it is the biggest thing that World of Warcraft does, right? So if you take players away from that, then like, what's going to happen?
Yeah, this has been an agonizing question that we've had for a while because we learned our lesson with Torghast. If everyone liked Torghast except for the fact that it went from a want to a need for everyone.
Torghast sucked. It was a cool concept, sucked so bad. I remember my guilty Polo. Um, I was a rogue when Shadowlands came out, and it was like right when it first came out. Like I couldn't solo it. And shout out to him because he ran me through it. Almost to the point where like I was just AFK watching like Family Guy and like Asmongold. He still holds it over my head to this day. But yeah, just funny. Torghast sucked. Don't do that shit again unless it's like purely cosmetic, like the Mage Tower or something like that.
To do it right, and we want to make sure that for delves, for the people who are like, hey, I love raiding, I love doing mythics. We want to make sure this is feel like a thing that you need to do to stay competitive. I think it would be a failure of the system if someone like couldn't go to a raid because like you didn't do that Earth Crawl Mines tier 8. Sorry, you're out today. Like you gotta get that roll of the vault so you can get
Good.
everything. And so we want to really make sure that it's a
Get the
fun thing to
sweaties out.
do if you're considered like a raid level player, but not a need to do. Um, yeah, and so that'll be a balance. We'll figure out where that lands because we also want to make sure the rewards are great. It's going to be a very fine line to
Yeah,
get that
it's a
right.
hard line.
But all of us are very focused on like we've been talking about that since like day one of Delves is like what are the rewards going to be and how do we make sure it feels good for solo players and doesn't feel like a requirement of now I have to do even more things that it, on top of everything that just I like doing. I like raiding and I don't
It's
we
always
don't
a
want to
fine
force
line.
you out of that.
Yeah, see?
Mm-hmm. All right. So another question, I guess, that some people had is specifically they wanted to have more solo content, which Delphs could be solo content for those players as well. But I think people were also asking for something like the Mage Tower to be back.
Yes.
Would Delphs be considered to be similar to a Mage Tower, or is a Mage Tower like higher in difficulty in comparison? Where would you put like those two?
So we do have a special thing in Delves, and I think I could talk about it, so I'll say it anyway. We'll see what happens if Ian goes. Does the Ian face? Maybe that could be the thumbnail.
I love Ian's face. It's so
So
funny.
right now the plan is for the 11 tiers that at tier 8 we stop giving different rewards, kind of like in Mythic of like, hey, at a certain point we're not going to give you higher rewards. So tiers 9, 10, or 11 are meant to be hard mode. Like this is a thing that you do because I really want something hard to hit me. We won't be able to get on the exact fine-tuned balancing of Mage Tower, but we do have the concept of the 13th Delve. And that is a thing that you can. We're still figuring out the exact way to unlock it, but it is essentially for the
Okay.
player that finishes the season. And then said, well, I still want something hard to like super hard to overcome. I've beaten tier 11. The 13th Delve is essentially our one room boss fight where we're going to hit you as hard as humanly possible on here. And so the plan is to get up towards that Mage Tower difficulty. It
Nice.
won't be a thing that it's exactly Mage Tower because it's not going to be based on like every single spec that we have.
Okay.
I can say we tested it last week and no one beat it. And so we were like, cool, we're on the right track. Like it's kicking our butts. We actually have to play smarter on this. And so yeah, it's going to be a continual thing, but that is kind of our Mage Tower equivalent on Delves, and tier 11 is gonna be pretty tough too. But
Okay. I like
that's
that.
that's the plan right now.
That's good.
All right. Well, that sounds really cool. Okay, that is definitely something that I'm going to be checking out then as well. All right. So I did have one more question about Mythic Plus in general. If you guys want to talk about that as well. So I was wondering if you have planned any major changes when it comes to affixes in Mythic Plus in the War Within, and specifically also if seasonal affixes are something that you consider bringing back, because people have been talking about it a lot that they're missing the seasonal affix. I know that the purpose of the seasonal affix is kind of gone now with the new rotation of the dungeons, but people are still like wanting something like that back. So is that something you consider?
To be honest, I don't really keep up with Mythic. I think that I want to start getting into it because of War Within, and I think it's a good time because it kind of simplified it, and I kind of want to do content for you guys as well, right? So I don't really have much insight on this, so we're kind of just gonna watch this, and if something comes up, that will come up, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I think what we can say is the team is talking about it right now. I don't think they're ready and final enough with it where we're ready to actually talk about the specifics around the affix, et cetera. But I know that it's something the team talks about all the time. The seasonal affixes are great because they add a lot of variety. They also are challenging to balance over time, and it makes some seasons more difficult or more challenging, or maybe for some players not as interesting. And so there's been pros and cons on that, but it's something the team's talking about, and we will be talking about that soon, but unfortunately not today.
Okay.
Good answer. That's fine.
All right. Okay, then I have another question about.
That's the reality of not sending the questions in beforehand, right? Sometimes you might just get shut down because they can't talk about it.
I'm just gonna go all over the place here, okay, if that's fine. So I'm gonna talk about defensive. So almost every spec now, since the talent system was reworked, I feel like a lot of classes and specs got very powerful defensives. active and also passives. And it seems like it resulted in most mythic content dealing lethal damage unless everyone presses their defensives that they have available to them, which created this kind of dynamic where healing is much less about healing, but it's more about the players being at or close to 100% health at all times and pressing the defenses based on their big wigs or DBM timers, just counting them down, saying, press this now. And is that something that in the War Within is something that you consider changing, or are you happy with how it is right now?
I wouldn't say we're happy. And just because I didn't say it earlier, quick introduction. So Michael Bybee, production director on World of Warcraft. I rejoined the team last summer after we worked on, I was on Diablo 4 for a little while, and then I used to be on the team. I shipped Legion, Battle for Azeroth, and worked on Shadowlands before I moved over to Diablo 4. And to answer your question more specifically, that I say I don't think we're really happy with it because of all the things that you just mentioned, right? This is a sort of an ongoing challenge for the game and for balance and tuning. Neither Sean or I are on the class or encounters team and can't really talk about a lot of the specifics, but what I can say is like this is a thing that the team is talking about all the time. Specifically though, the issue where when you're running high-end content especially, and the encounters essentially respond to the fact that very talented players like yourself are increasingly using I mean, it's not even increasingly, it's just a fact of life is you have to use add-ons, you have to use a lot of like WeakRs and other things to be able to offload some of the cognitive load of being able to do the encounter, which means that the design team knows that you're doing that. So then we have to make things more challenging, which then means that add-on authors and add-on, the way that you use add-ons sort of escalates, and it does this thing where it gets harder, so that we have to use more add-ons, et cetera, to continue to manage that. And that's a thing that doesn't end in fun experience for a lot of players.
Yeah, so that's actually true. So that's one thing that I know they're talking about like Mythic here, and like probably like PvE side of it, but this actually also applies to the PvP side of it. It's like, well, before I dive to the PvP side of it, what he's saying, it's like it's a snowball effect, right? Like they create this fight, add-ons make it super easy for us to do. So what can we do since we know we're doing add-ons? We as a dev team, well, we got to make this super difficult. Okay, so let's make this harder, knowing that they're going to use these add-ons to tell them what to do, what defenses to pop, where to move, stuff like that, right? And then it goes back to the team, like, okay, shit. Go back to the add-on developers, like, okay, how can we make this easier for our players? Do whatever they need to do to incorporate those things into their add-ons. Goes back to the fight. A fight is pretty much like almost automated. Tells you what to do, where to do, where to go, what to use, what defenses to use, right? So this is where it kind of reflects on PvP side, is PvP is really reactive right now, right? Like you start to open up, or an arena starts, right? You are getting bursted. Like Marksman Hunter comes out of nowhere, shoots you with an aim shot, half your health, you are reacting to its you're popping your defenses right away, right? That feels bad because you're like, oh shit, I'm about to die. I need to pop everything right now, right? So it makes everything super reactive, which is a good thing to an extent, right? Like you want to be like you should be reacting in a sense of like, oh shit, this guy just popped his cooldown as far as like he's about to burst. Like, what can I do, right, to do it? And it's a very fine line because you want to be reactive. You want to be reactive in the sense that like you're able to tell what's going on and have outplay capability. You shouldn't panic to react, right? You should be proactive with what you're doing, right? So not reactive, but proactive in the sense that like, oh, I can see this priest is power infusing this mage. This mage is popping his trinket. I need to play back defensively and not take 80% of my damage to the face right now. We're at the point where like I cannot play the game anymore. And I have to react so fast to the point where I need an add-on to tell me, like auditorily, is that a word? Like Gladiator Losa, that tells me, oh, this mage popped this, and this, right? Because I can't pay attention to it because I'm panicking because my health is at 20% from one ability, right? So like we need to get rid of that fastness because it shouldn't be reactive to the point where like if you don't react within a second of this mage pressing all his buttons, you are done for and the game is done and you're dead, right? That feels bad. That's not fun. No one likes to get bursted, right? It's just not a thing. So I feel like this is kind of where it ties into PvP, and that's kind of what they're saying is like in mythic encounters and raids and stuff like that, like in order for you to not get one shot, you have to pop all your shit beforehand, right? And I know that's proactive, but like you're doing that so you don't get one shot, right? So like it should be more like, oh shit, this is happening. What can I do to outplay? Like he mentioned before, the healers, their concept is keeping everyone at 100% the whole time, instead of like actually healing someone when they're low and like trying to do other things, right? So it's just like it's a very difficult and fine line, but I feel like that's where a lot of the PvP, like I'm a huge PvPer. That's what a lot of like the concern is. I mean, from the PvP audience right now, it's like it's just so hard to keep up with all the PvP cooldowns, reactiveness. Like it's almost overbearing, and like if I'm getting one shot by a Demon Hunter, like I don't want to fucking play the game, right? Like it sucks.
But it's also really challenging to adjust because, you know, a lot of people really like that, and our encounters have changed over time to, you know, accommodate that. We talk about the defensives problem.
Hopefully I made sense. But I think he's about to touch on the defensives thing.
And the like, well, just don't get hit. And then, you know, I was running a Resto Druid in Mythic Plus in this season 3 for Dragonflight. And, you know, I spent most of my time in cat form, frankly, because
Yeah, see?
if you're doing content right and you're interrupting right and you're doing AoE CCs, etc., I don't need to heal because people are mostly healing themselves. They're mostly using their defensives. If we're doing it right, you're not really getting a lot of damage. And I wasn't having to heal quite a lot. And I actually found that to be kind of an interesting experience, but not the core of what I think that experience is meant to be. So it's a long-winded way of saying that this is something the team talks about all the time. For specifically rolling out the encounters for the War Within's first raids and Mythic Plus dungeons, I don't think you're going to see like major changes to those structures. What you're going to see is iterative developments, but in the longer term, it's something that we want to address directly.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's something that you mentioned as well that's in M+, if everyone plays correctly, you don't feel like you have to heal that much. Something that I noticed as well is that because that is true, if you play in a group where everyone does play well, then the person that is the least like
Skilled.
useful seems to be the healer, and then they have to be the ones that take out all of these jobs, like dealing with affixes and doing all of these jobs that no one wants to do, which makes the healer role something that does all of these jobs that is not really healing, which makes I hate doing dungeons sometimes. And that is something that I thought was an issue specifically for the healer role, which, you know, not everyone is a fan of. Some people love it though. Some people love to do all these other jobs.
Honestly, that's the hard thing with balancing that is for some folks, it's so much more interesting than just keeping health bars up, you know, trying to contribute to damage, trying to take care of affixes that are popping up in various places, just all sorts of things. I think one of the ways that we're addressing it in the design of the classes is just giving healing classes more options. Some options where you're actually doing more damage as a healer, some options where you've got a little bit more utility. Definitely something they would want to improve.
All right, cool. Then I have a question about like player power regarding to items. I'm not sure if you can answer this question, but I think the power of the item upgrade system introduced in the middle of the last expansion basically means that the power that players gain has moved almost entirely to the very start of a patch, rather than it being like very progressive throughout the patch. And that created this kind of a weird dynamic where a guild that kills the last boss of the mythic raid 2 or 3 months into a patch has the same item level as a guild that kills it within like a couple of weeks, like the world first kills, for example. And I'm not sure, like, is that something you want to move forward with? Are you happy with that? Because it results in like last bosses having to be nerfed a bunch because it might not be killable for those guilds. And on one hand, it's nice to be able to get the gear so quickly. A lot of people really love the upgrade system, myself included. But yeah, how do you want to address this kind of issue with not being able to have a gear progression or character progression after a couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things there. One,
a good question,
just
dude.
kind of get it out of the gate. For 10.2 in Amir Dersil, there was, you know, a little bit of an experience at the beginning of that patch where I think gear progression was even faster for a whole bunch of reasons related to the Renown and the Dream Wardens that made it not work out exactly as we had planned, let's just say. But so the goal wouldn't be to do that in the future. But the thing that you're specifically talking about is like gear progression. The way it works right now is it's a little bit of a curve that flattens out over time. And so
Yeah.
the end of the curve where it's really, you're not getting as much of an iterative improvement over your item level. You get a lot of rapid development early on, and then it slows over time for, especially for folks that are pushing the hardest content. That is less interesting. There's pros and cons though, because the other side of it is that it opens up a lot of accessibility for a broader swath of players to be able to engage in that content than ever have before. And so what we want to do is be able to keep that accessibility while still making it feel like, you know, continuing to invest in mythic rating, et cetera, is meaningful, which it doesn't always feel like right now.
All right. Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, interesting. All right, then I have one more question.
He didn't really answer the
about,
question, but
the
it's all
hero
right.
talents. So the hero talents seem super powerful for, if one talent is really powerful for one spec, but for the other spec that shares the hero talent tree, it might be underwhelming. Are you willing to maybe balance numbers specifically for one spec, or are you only willing to change a talent for both specs simultaneously?
That's a good question.
I think the answer to the question is we're going to do what feels the most right for the most players, right? Which means that in some cases we may end up having to tune a particular hero talent tree to work for the spec. Like if 80% of players are playing it in one specific spec, I could see us making adjustments to make it work a little bit more.
That's
but
nice.
That's not the goal. The goal is to make it feel like you actually have choices. That's always challenging in a game like ours when you've got tons and tons of players and especially pushing high-end content. But the goal is that it feels like you actually have a choice. And so I just think that when it gets to the most high-end content, we're going to be forced to make the choice that, you know, makes this work out the best for the most players that are using it in a particular way.
Yeah, that's a hard thing because like I think there's always going to be like that optimal build, right, that just does the most damage, and that's fine. I feel like it just can't be too, in my opinion, it shouldn't be the reason why you have to play that, because it's like, oh, it's so much better that if I play something else or if I play a different spec or a different hero talent, I'm just not competitive at all, right? It shouldn't be that way, right? And that goes back to the whole thing, like, if you're good, you should be able to play most specs that you can, right? Kind of the build whatever you want, right? It should be more about like, hey, my skill level can shine through this without being penalized because I'm going a different build that most people aren't going, but I'm doing like 40% less damage, right? Or like my CC isn't as good, my server load is good. That feels really bad because you're kind of pigeonholed to one specific build that may not really fit your playstyle, right? Like if you're as a mage, right, like you're forced to go Frost because Frost is going to be the best one ever, but you like the mobility of Fire, right? Or vice versa. Like you love Fire so much, but Frost has so much CC and so much damage that you have to go Frost, which is more of like a standstill kind of caster or something like that, right? Like that feels really bad, right? Like you should be able to play any spec that you want and be competitive, right? Overall, that should be the experience. When you get to super high end content, I'm talking like rank 1, like 2.8k, like UPMMR, then you're gonna have your builds at like those 2 to 3%, like damage differences make a huge difference, right? It's just the way that it is. I don't think it's something that realistically, I don't think it's something that you can fix, but it shouldn't penalize you too much for doing something else.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll continue to take feedback and iterate on that. And I think it's going to be interesting. I think where we end up with that system is going to be very different from where we started, you know. But I'm personally very excited. I think the fantasy of the hero talent system is one of the most exciting pieces of it. Just
I agree.
Making like I don't know if you got a chance to check out the Void Weaver Priest that's on the alpha, but the ability that we're adding for, you know, Shadow Priests is, I think, really, really cool. Shadow Priests have access to a totally different talent tree that we haven't shared yet, but the Void Weaver one, I think, is the one that lines up most directly with the Shadow Priest fantasy. And the idea that you're just opening a portal to the void that sort of sucks in all of the enemies around, I think is a really cool idea. And frankly, right now it feels pretty overpowered.
There it is.
Unfortunately, did not get to check that out yet, but I did see some of the other hero talents, and I love the animations and how it like how those two specs come together and how everything looks. I think it's going to be really cool, and a lot of people are going to be super excited about that.
100%.
So yeah, I'm super interested to see what you have for all of the hero
Frostfire
talents.
Mage, dude. Sick.
So I'm excited to test it all on beta or an alpha. All right. So I have one more question. I'm not sure if you guys even remember this. So a long time ago, Ian had an interview with somebody, and he specifically talked about the UI. This was before Dragonflight even came out. And he was saying that you are working on UI reworks and doing a lot of changes there. And he said that the resource bar that is in the middle of your screen, that the team wants to iterate on that one in the future, so you can customize it a bit more. So specifically to replace some of the weakers, maybe. So let's say if you're a tank and you get pain suppression, that you would be able to add that to your resource bar if you would want to do so, or if you're a damage dealer, to see power infusion or something like that. Is that something that is still being worked on, or is it something you can talk about?
Can't talk about it, but still being worked on. That's the best way to answer that. The key is like we absolutely want to make that work out for players. But weak ores is incredibly powerful, and so I
Yeah,
don't
that's true.
think
Weak ores is too hard.
It's probably unlikely that you're going to see the entire weak ore system, totally replicated in the WoW UI. But finding ways to make it more, make certain actions work out better in the base WoW UI, I think is definitely the goal.
I know Weak OS is a huge following, and it is pretty awesome, but it does feel bad, especially as a new player. Like if you want to play this game, you have to get these add-ons for the game to function correctly, right? Like it shouldn't be that way. And I know a lot of people have backlash, who is like really pro add-on, really against add-ons. I think the more you can normalize it and have it within the game, it's good, right? I think having accessibility to add-ons to make the game more accessible for people, that's fine to an extent. Like you shouldn't have to download add-ons in order for this gameplay to be done correctly. That's where like I think the hard part is.
No specific things around that right now, and frankly it might be a while before we're ready to talk about that.
Okay.
He's honest. That's awesome.
All right.
I like that guy.
Anything else you would want to
He's
talk
well spoken.
about that, again, you're maybe really interested in the War Within, or something that you worked on, something that you can share more information about?
Ivy's usually the one telling us get it done faster. I'm more boots on the ground. Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm, it's been delves for a very long time. I think, we've been doing a lot of work trying to figure out how to make Bran feel like a cool companion and not just another, we get a guardian in a quest that's kind of just following you around like that. This is exactly how they follow you in quest, just like that, right? And so we want to see how to give him character. We tested a lot of stuff out with follower dungeons, and we're working closely with the team that's been working on those. It's like, hey, how do we punch it up a bit? The benefit that we have with delves there is that they're not meant to be as like hardcore. Like we can have we can have extra action buttons. Like if you cool toys, we can say, hey, you're immune to damage for a minute, in the delve, which we wouldn't necessarily do in a dungeon. And so like what are some fun things we can do with Bran? Like, I thought people wouldn't know it, but in one of the other interviews we did, everyone was like, oh, we saw that already. So I was like, well, that's touche. If you go AFK for a little bit, Bran will find a wall to just lean against while he's waiting for you. And so
It's cool.
we're
Little
excited about a
details.
lot of those little
It's
things
awesome.
that maybe people will never see, but it's there, and that people can kind of talk about. Oh, did you know, Brand does X, Y, and Z if you do the following things. Trying to do fun things. We do have, for a spoiler, we do have an underwater delve that
Yeah, I saw a
we're
snippet of
excited
that. It's
about.
in the video.
We thought no one would like it when we tested it internally, but we made it so you can't swim, so there is just kind of normal movement when you're
Nice.
moving around, and we tried it out, and people were like, this is a lot of fun. And I was like, thank goodness, because I was out of ideas if we didn't like this one for this particular delve. So
That's funny.
that's one that we're really excited about because it's super weird and it works with the breath bar. There's bubbles. We found that we can kind of tell how old somebody is based on the underwater trauma they have from a video game. Of when someone goes, oh, this reminds me of that video game. Like, oh, I see what generation you're in now. Of like which game caused you the most anxiety for underwater gameplay. But yeah, so for me, there's a lot of interesting things that are coming up with delves that we haven't seen yet. There's all the different scenarios that we have, and so like with the Earth Curl mines, you saw like rescuing a bunch of earthen on a mine cart. The plan is at max level that'll randomize a bit, And so kind of like World Quest, where when you go in tomorrow, the Earthen aren't there anymore, but now there's an Arathi that's
That's
come
cool.
up from Hallowfall that says,
Changing
here's a
shit out
torch,
so it doesn't
burn
become
everything
too
you see. And so now those
stale.
webs you had to avoid before, it's actually just go straight into them with that flamethrower, take it all apart. But now there's some new mobs that will spawn webbing, and so you have to kind of dynamically deal with that. And so that kind of change in gameplay I'm really excited about that we might not necessarily see right now, but it is something that we're working on like in the background to get a lot of variety into the delves.
Okay, yeah, that is very cool. One, because I only managed to test delves solo. I didn't do any group testing. One Mac, you can go with 4 people max, right? Or was it 5?
Full team of 5.
Team of 5, okay. But Bren always is with you, even if you're with 5 people, right?
Yep, he can always be there.
Okay, cool. So he's a
So
6
one
person.
thing I was wondering about as well, since you just talked about earlier about that you can have higher tiers that are going to be actually challenging and more difficult, and that the rewards don't scale up higher, and you really should want to do that if you're seeking the challenge. Are you like, how are you dealing with the scaling difficulty, like between, let's say I'm doing it by myself versus a full group? That is something that we've seen some issues with, like in heroic raids, for example, where it seemed to be always easier if you have a certain amount of players, like, oh, we need to do this with like 13 players exactly,
Oh, I
otherwise
see, I
it's really
see.
hard or it's really easy. Is that something that you struggle with delves as well with tuning, or do you figure out a
Yeah, is it
proper
like
strategy to deal with
you
that?
had to have a full 5? Is
Yeah,
3
there's
better?
definitely not a designer sweating right now going, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? We are taking the same system that we had in Torghast, because Torghast under the hood had a lot of that scaling that we could do for the group size and also per role, per class, and per spec. And so the idea is looking at, from like a number crunching way of like, hey, are there classes that are underperforming? How do we balance that out? Are there group sizes that are underperforming? How do we balance that out? And so we're going to do our best to make sure, hey, that feels really great from
That's
the
good.
data that we have, and just from playing through, like, hey, does it just feel like, I know the data says Shadow Priest is great, but it just feels terrible doing, like, so we're going to ignore that and actually just do some things to fix that up.
That's good.
And so it is going to be a balancing act. Hopefully a little easier because we have a much smaller number to balance around, and also that we're not, while we want delves to be hard, we want that curve, right? Because one of the important things, at least like my experience with the game, is that you go from the outdoor world content, which is pretty simple on purpose, and then when you get to max level, it's like, hey, where are your add-ons? Know the route. And so delves is meant to be that kind of middle ground of, hey, you can kind of scale up to
Nice.
difficulty and things like that. And so we're never going to be a thing where it's like, hey, you need to be incredibly on the ball to do it. And I think that's where we get the kind of leeway of like, yeah, there's some blood DKs. Yeah, one of our main designers is blood DK, and it's my goal to eventually kill him at one of the tiers. It hasn't happened yet, but we haven't just started testing super hard at like tier 10 or 11.
I like that.
But the goal is there. We have a lot of tools at our disposal, and we will have the data that's looking at that we can look at and go, okay, let's tweak this. Maybe a bit too easy here. Um, so yeah, it'll be an ongoing thing. I'm sure to get it right.
Okay, cool, very interesting. Yeah, I can imagine that being very difficult.
Yeah, it'll be a challenge, but I'm sure we've got a lot of resources that we can do to kind of pull it off.
Mhm. All right, so one more question about rate buffs. So rate buffs have been added to almost every spec in a game nowadays.
Yeah,
And
really
such that
normalized.
in high-end mythic raid comps, now the majority of the slots are filled by somebody that brings an important raid buff. But then there are some specs like Elemental Shaman, Raster Shaman that bring nothing to the table, and they see almost no play among top guilds, except in tiers where their throughput is much better than a spec that does have a raid buff. Is that something that you want to consider to change in the War Within, or are you happy with the current situation of the raid buffs?
Yeah, it's
It's a good
definitely
question.
something we're talking about. I am not aware of a specific change that we can share today around that, but I know the class team is talking about that. And based on some of the stuff we were talking about earlier, we don't really like it when it feels like you can't take a class
Yeah.
or when you
Bad for
have
the
to
game.
take a specific class. Maybe that's okay at the most, top tier difficulty, but the vast majority of people should feel like it's okay to play a shaman and not feel like you're going to get ostracized. And I am planning to play a shaman in this expansion, so I better not be ostracized as a result of that.
He's hinting at it.
All right. Okay, good.
Hinting at it.
There's one more question I have about the Fated/Awakened season. Is that something that you plan on continuing and adding moving forward in the War Within and further expansions as well?
We like it, but I don't know that we're ready to commit to always doing that with every expansion. You know, there's pros and cons. On the one hand, it's great to be able to refresh the existing experience and make it interesting and give you an opportunity to play through it for more rewards. On the other hand, you know, it is playing through content that you've played through before, and so we're watching the feedback that we're getting right now before the Fated or the Awakened season has started. We'll listen to how players are responding to it. And then based on how the timing works out between the War Within and Midnight, we'll have a conversation about whether or not that still makes sense. So not ready to commit to that entirely.
Okay, cool. Okay, one more fun question at the end. Are you going to be turning on the arachnophobia filter and going to turn all of the Peruvians into crabs, or are you going to let them be spiders?
I actually have a very personal answer to this one.
Oh no, you scared?
So I love that we have the arachnophobia filter. I'm excited about that, and it is going to be available from pre-patch as soon as the pre-patch launches.
So for y'all that don't know, so War Within is adding this feature where you can switch any kind of model that's in World of Warcraft that's a spider or some sort of arachnid and change it to a crab. I know it sounds silly, but it's for people who have arachnophobia. And one thing that has pissed me off about this, which let me state very clearly, I am very pro for this because there's a reason they added it, right? So everyone's like, oh, everyone's so soft. Like, who's actually scared of like spiders like that? Like, if you don't like it, don't play the game. Or like people are like kind of making fun of it, saying like, oh, like what if I'm scared of crabs, right? Like, is there like a bunny filter or whatever, right? Like, people being assholes online, right? Well, first and foremost, arachnophobia is probably one of the most common phobias out there. It's probably the one that most people have heard of, right? And another thing too that people don't like, I feel like don't get is in order for Blizzard to add something like this, the feedback that they get must be coming from somewhere, right? Like if they had people saying like, oh, like I am so scared of like or I have thalassophobia, which is like the open sea one, stuff like that, right? Then they probably wouldn't have a lot of levels that do that kind of stuff, right? So like, first of all, they did it because they probably had a lot of feedback on it and wanted to take care of that issue. Second of all, if it doesn't bother you, then don't why does it matter to you? It doesn't matter. Don't put it on. Big deal. Don't make fun of other people that have that phobia. Like it just doesn't make sense to me why people are so pressed about it. Like if it applies to you, great. You get to play the game. If it doesn't, who cares? Move on. It doesn't affect you. Don't make fun of people that want to use it, or don't ostracize people for doing it.
However, I am a huge fan of spiders. This is like no.
That's crazy. I thought it was the opposite. I thought he was scared.
Really, it's something that folks on the team, Sean's nodding his head. Anybody who's worked with me for years, I actually, you can't see it, but up on my shelf next to my desk here, I have a display case with vials of spiders on display, including like black widows and some other things. I'm a big fan of spiders. I think spiders are super cool. I read books about spider biology. I'm super excited to go to Ajkahet and the Nerubians and have a whole raid associated with a race of spider-like creatures. Like, I think it's super cool and it's super fun, and I'm very jazzed about it. So I personally will not be turning on that filter.
Yeah, it's very unnerving walking into Bybie's office, especially when he has the spider in his hand and going, well, tell me how this is going to be late again. And he kind of just leans the Black Widow closer and closer to your face. I'm in a similar camp. I did I think some people called it the Nope Cave in Azure Span with a ton of spiders hanging from that. That was me. And so I'll be playing with the arachnophobia filter off, so see what'll scare me.
All right, very cool.
That's funny.
All right, that was it for my questions. Unless you guys want to share anything more, then I'm of course happy to listen.
I think the only other thing I want to say is
maybe
one of the things that I find really interesting about this team is, the team has been around for a while, but we've also changed a lot. And so I mentioned that I just returned last summer and that this team is pushing the boundaries of what this game can do. Plunderstorm was an example. The Mists of Pandaria remix is another example. I think you're going to see more and more of that stuff coming from all aspects of the team. You see Season of Discovery is a great example of that in the classic space. I'm just so impressed by the amount of passion this team has.
The outro music.
And I think that the WoW team is doing more than ever before to like give players awesome experiences always. And so I'm just really excited about that, excited to play it, and excited to share that with folks. And you asked great questions, so this was fantastic. Thanks today.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You know
very
what?
much.
She did ask really good questions, man. But anyway, again, this is Naguura, Twitch streamer, does content all the time. She's cool. She's actually very high rated too. So like she does have a lot of like experience when it comes to like high level mythic rating, keys, stuff like that, right? Like she's been a top tier mythic raider and just mythic dungeons player. But yeah, I think she did an awesome job. Those are some really good questions, and I think a lot of it, I know a lot of it was focused on the PvE side of it, but I do think that a lot of the questions that she asked did apply back to the overall part of the game and the overall part of the issues that some of them are facing, like the balancing, the classes, things like that, right? So I do think that she did an awesome job. And again, I know that there's another video that I released, or I'm going to release, that I shot earlier today actually, about Bellylur's interview with Holly Longdale, who is like the executive producer. It just feels good that the team, that these seeded developers and the executive producer are both like, not both, but like going in the right direction, and everything feels like it's going to be better, and they're working a lot of the internal issues and addressing those and being open with the community about it. That's the biggest part, is like the community is involved to an extent. They're giving feedback, they're listening, they're trying to incorporate our points of views, our challenges that we face as players, and also trying the inclusivity of the type of players, right? They're not just only appealing to what makes the most money, or you know, what the 1% wants, the high-end content creator, you know, not content creators, the high-end raiders, the high-end like mythic guilds and stuff like that, right? It's about the whole casual players, which I think is a huge majority of the people that play the game, that pay the sub, that buy the expansion and love this game, right? Myself included, right? So great job. Y'all follow the Twitch. Thank y'all for watching. Please like, subscribe to the video. Follow for more. Gonna do a lot more React content, especially War Within coming out, not coming out soon, but with all the alpha rolling out, beta rolling out, definitely gonna do a lot of React content. Follow the Twitch. Gonna play a lot of games there. Currently playing Backrooms. Started Diablo 4 for the first time, so that's pretty awesome. Play some more content there. Do a lot of arena and PvP, mostly on that side for a while. But thank y'all for watching. Again, like, subscribe, follow the Twitch. See y'all there. Peace.